Today we start the process of learning how to read and understand the Psalms of Lament. David's being chased, people trying to kill him. He's raining down fire on his enemies. He's doing all kinds of things. We're going to learn how to read that stuff because it's totally different than what we read over in the New Testament. Okay? So David, yeah. What it is, it's well, no, it's about people. They're going through the problems that you and I go through, okay? And they're calling on God. It's times of stress, it's times of sadness, it's times of any kind of thing you can think of that would be spiritual problems, mental problems, emotional problems, physical problems, any of those kind of problems people are going through. They go to God looking for God to do something about it. They're crying out for mercy. They're crying out for judgment. They're crying out for all kinds of things, trying to get involved in their own situation. And then sometimes God just doesn't seem like He's there. So what do you do about that? Huh? We can relate, right? So we're going to be talking about those things, and all the Psalms, all of them are different. There's that list of 41 of them. I'll get you the list. I'll give it to you before. I'll give you another list, Don. Yeah, before we leave, I'll give you the list. Here they are. But I've got them documented in a note. It's got all the Psalms broken, categorized. So I'll give you that just so you'll have it. But David appears before God in Psalm 7. He appears before God to plead with Him against his accuser, Cush, who has charged him with treason and treachery, which I do not get. I will tell you right now when we get to that part. But Cush is a Benjamite. I'm getting that from right under the Psalm 7. It says a Shiggaion of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning Cush, a Benjamite. Okay, it means, the word Cush means black. He may be in Saul's court. It may even be Saul himself. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin, so it might even be Saul that we're talking about. That seems to fit into David's problems with it being Saul. It may be real or it may be symbolic, but for sure he is a black-hearted villain. That's the way Philip puts it. Yeah, it's a bad dude. Bad in relation to David. All right. So there's three parts to this psalm. They're right here: justification, judgment, and jubilation. That last verse, you're saying, we don't even need that. Wait till you hear what I got to say about it. You're going to say, wow. But that's only one verse. But the first 5 verses are justification. Verses 6 through 16 are judgment. And verse 17 is jubilation. That's the outline for the chapter. I had a real problem with this in the beginning of my study because Charles Spurgeon refers to the accusation from Cush as being related to treason and treachery. I don't get that. I can't find that. I don't see it anywhere. I cannot see this at all. The Brahman commentary says that this psalm is not about a specific event in David's life. Except that it is about the fear of someone wanting to kill him who is chasing him, like Saul. You know, we talked last week about Saul. You know, we all know that Saul spent a lot of time chasing after David, wanting to kill him. So a lot of the Psalms are about that. That's in here. You know, that kind of stuff is in here. Might be Saul that's after him. Okay, so first five verses are about justification. Let me read the first 5 verses. O Lord my God, I take refuge in you. Save and deliver me from all who pursue me, so they will tear me like a lion and rip me to pieces with no one to rescue me. O Lord my God, I have done this, and if I have done this, and there is guilt on my hands, if I have done evil to him who is at peace with me, or without cause have robbed my foe, then let my enemy pursue and overtake me. Let him trample my life to the ground and make me sleep in the dust. Pretty fierce. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah. So in verse 1 and 2, he calls on Jehovah for refuge. He lays claim to him as his God. He says, my God. He said, oh Lord, my God. So he's laying claim to God as his God. He wants deliverance from pursuit, from tearing, and from ripping. He doesn't want anybody chasing him. He doesn't want anybody tearing him, and he doesn't want anybody ripping him. We're going to talk about those things. Except for the first one, the pursuit, the other two are metaphorical. All right. It may be metaphorical, but it indicates a very, even metaphorically, it indicates a very undignified death. It indicates horrific rending and tearing, as when lions fight over their prey. The terror is so great that the psalmist realizes without the protection of God, there is no hope for escape. That's what that's about. What I thought was interesting, he refers there to they will tear me like a lion. When we studied Psalm 57, verse 4 last week, we talked about lions, the same kind of thing, chasing and tearing and that sort of thing. I never realized that there are lions in Israel. Because you get over to Peter, and Peter said the same thing in 1 Peter 5 and 8. He's talked about, sin crouching like a lion. We talked in 57, mentioned it. Here we're into verse 7, chapter 7, and it's the same thing. He's talking about lions. So this is a common thing that we're going to see as we go through. So verse 3 through 5, David is looking for vindication from God. That's what we do, right? We call out to God because we got a problem. We want him to relieve the problem, but he also wants to rule in our favor. That's really what we want. David is looking for vindication, but he's already justified himself. He's got two if statements there and then one then statement. We're going to talk about that. He said, let me read them again. If I have done this, and there is guilt on my hands, if I have done evil to him who is at peace with me, or without cause have robbed my foe, then my enemy should do those things: chase me, pursue me, rip me, kill me, tear me, let me die. Those things. So he's got the if statements, and he says, now my notes get really squirrely right here. He said, this is a self-curse. Just think about that. If I have done this, then it's all right. If I've done these things. In verse 3 through 5, David's looking for vindication. He's already justified himself, but what he has done here. Let me read those if statements again. Starts in verse 3. He said, Lord my God, if I have done this, and there is guilt on my hands, if I have done evil to him who is at peace with me, or without cause have robbed my foe, then let my enemy pursue, overtake me, and let him trample me, and let me die, and those sorts of things. What he has done is put a self-curse on himself. Right? He said, I'm innocent. I am so innocent that I will say, if I'm not innocent, you can just let those things happen. He's so sure. I've been so sure too. You know what I read when I read that? If a guy does not know David at all, he would say, sounds like the guy that protests too much, right? The guy that's guilty protests too much. Sounds like him. But then I know David. I know that he, at times has had some pretty tough things in his life where he was guilty of lots of things and he ignored them until he got caught. So you still got to take it with a little grain of salt. But you get to the very end and you're saying, it's the same thing as saying, if I'm lying, I'm dying, right? But probably not, because it's probably truthful on David's part. We'll see as we go along. But I covered all that. All right. So the if statements are the accusations. Now, I'm going to back up just a minute. What Charles Spurgeon said, the accusations against David are treason and treachery. I don't see that anywhere. I already told him that. I don't see it anywhere. It doesn't matter what it is. The accusations are listed right there in the if statements. David is accused of iniquity. That's the thing that gets me. My NIV says, if I've done this and there is guilt on my hands. Well, if you go to the word guilt, if you look at the Interlinear Bible or you look at King James or you look at the New American Standard, it doesn't say guilt, it says something else. What does it say? Verse 3, if that's good.
Verse 3 I've got, for NASB, if there is injustice.
ESV, though, has if there is wrong.
Okay. Well, when you go to the NIV, the actual word means injustice or unrighteousness. So this is a translation of the Word of God. It's not the Word of God. It's a translation of the Word of God. The Word of God is the Hebrew. So we get a better, if we can go back and look at the Hebrew, or you go back and look at the Greek, if you're talking about New Testament, you get a deeper understanding. But see, if they translate literally, you couldn't read it. If you want to know what the literal translation is, go get the Interlinear Bible and you're saying, I'm not doing this. I mean, you can't understand it. So we have a translation, okay? But the words are injustice and unrighteousness. It may translate as injustice on my hands, or if I have been unfair, deceitful, dishonest in dealing with other people, is what it means. That's what he's accused of. I haven't done those things. Also accused of being and doing evil toward a person with whom he is at peace. It's a friend, right? You're friends. Hopefully, you're friends with you're at peace with your friends. But something I've accused of doing something to disrupt that peace. There is evil in the sense of breaking up that which is good. I suppose something like destroying the peace. I was accused of doing that. It's your fault. You caused, everything was good in our relationship. You did something. You caused this thing to just explode and blow up. Okay, so called on God, but nothing has changed. God has not yet begun to act. This is where we find ourselves sometimes. We're going to find ourselves in a lot of these Psalms right here at this point, in a lot of these things. We have been fighting fires, chasing demons, fighting fires and chasing demons at work, at home, wherever. Then one day we realize we should have called on God much earlier in the process. Hey?
Don't wait till you're in hot water.
Yeah, well, what's the normal thing to do? I can handle this. This is a little bitty thing. Turns out, not so little. It's festered and grown into this big thing. So there is almost, it almost seems to be a delay. uh, in his life and in ours, of God acting. There's a delay. Okay, so the background for the Psalms is very similar to that of Psalm 57. Saul is chasing after David, intending to kill him. David does not have many places left where he can flee, so he's at his wit's end. So apparently, these accusations are coming from Saul with something, with either as something done against Saul. Saul feels like something was done to him, or at least something done against somebody else who Saul knows and Saul believes. Okay, I'm a friend of Saul. David did this to me, and Saul believes me, so blah, blah, blah. So we're in here situation. So verse 5 says this: Then let my enemies pursue and overtake me. Let me trample my life to the ground and make me sleep in the dust. So David says to God, if this is true, let my enemy chase me, catch me, trample me, and let me die. But I'm innocent, so I know it's not going to happen. David is calling for judgment on his enemy. When we call for judgment, it may bring what on yourself? You ever call for judgment on anybody? I will tell you right now, I have. And then I realized, when you're calling down judgment on somebody, guess what you're opening yourself up to? The same thing. What does the New Testament say? Lest what? Lest you be judged. Okay? Well, this is a common occurrence. This is the way they did things in the Old Testament, in the Psalms. Judgment everywhere. I'm calling down judgment on you. My judgment, my big deal was, you'd say, well, you're justified in having that kind of call to judgment, but I don't think I am. My big deal was calling judgment down on drug dealers. How could God object to that? Drug dealers are stealing our children. How could God object to that? Well, it's not that he objects to, he doesn't want me to do that, but he says the vengeance is mine, judgment is mine. You're not supposed to be doing that. Still, it happens all the time. It's the way things were at the time the Psalms were written. So we're going to talk about that more as we go on. So I did realize, you're calling down judgment on somebody for whatever reason, even though it looks justified to everybody I know would say, that's no problem, except it is a problem. All right. Verse 6 to 8. It's an eye. Look at this as an eye towards judgment. Verse 6 to 8 says this: Arise, O Lord, in your anger. Rise up against the rage of my enemies. Awake, my God, decree justice. Let the assembled peoples gather around you. Rule over them from on high. Let the Lord judge the peoples. Judge me, O Lord. That's judging somebody else. Now he says, judge me. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness, according to my integrity, O Most High. So, David calls for God to arise. Other translations say rise up, awake, get. The one that I really like was the CEV. It says, get angry, do something.
It's like the little kid telling you, Daddy, go beat him up.
Well, that's what he said. My guy's bigger than yours,
Go beat him up.
But that's what the CEV says. Get angry, Lord God, do something. That's what we want, right? That's what David wants. That's what he really wants. To God, he says, don't come in cold and reserved like our judges come into the courtroom. Come in storming mad. This is what David is saying. That's what this psalm is saying. Come in storming mad. He's calling to get angry and judgment. My enemies are raging against me, he says. You do the same to them. They're raging against me. Get them. And he repeats himself and then calls for a decree of injustice. That's what he says at the end of, where is it, 8 somewhere. Yeah, it disappeared. Oh, there it is. End of 6. He says, "Awake, my God, decree justice, rule in favor of justice," and that's me. you know. So find them guilty. Uh, Rule on my behalf, which means to rule against my enemy. There's a lot of passion in these verses. I suppose once you feel you have God's ear, you might as well tell him everything. That's the way I see it. He's listening to me now. I'm going to dump on him. All right. The last part of verse 8 says, let's see, judge me, O Lord, according. Now I want you to think about this. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness, my integrity, O Most High. David must feel pretty secure in his faith to call for judgment on his behalf based on his righteousness and his integrity. I do not know if this means to judge him by comparison. My integrity is better than his integrity. Judge me on that basis, or judge me because of my integrity. You see what I'm saying? We got two. You got me, you got my enemy. On a scale of 1 to 10, am I better? Is my integrity better than his? And therefore rule in my favor? Or you just, see, here's the thing. It says, judge me based on my integrity and my righteousness. Now, just how righteous am I on my best day? On my best day, just how righteous am I? David's throwing that out there. Judge me based on my righteousness and my integrity. I'm getting ready to lay a bunch of stuff on you here when I flip this page over, I think. Let's keep going. Yep, right here, verse 9. O righteous God, who searches minds and hearts, bring to an end the wicked and make the righteous secure. I can see David kind of wilted down right here, and you are wilted down going through that. I can see you just dropping your shoulders, taking a big sigh when you get that word. It's kind of where David is. He's just kind of wilted down. I will call on him as the one who searches hearts and minds to judge the wicked and the righteous. Who are the wicked? David said, they are. Who are the righteous? He says, I am. You don't need to worry about that part, God. I'm telling you what that part is. Okay. So there you have it. Okay, now I want you to think about find Jeremiah 17, Jan. Jeremiah 17, verse 9 and 10. This is one of my core verses. Wayne showed me this verse. I will never forget it. These two verses, as long as I forget it, as long as I live. Jeremiah 17, verses 9 and 10. Remember, while she's looking, I want you to remember what basis he called on God here as one who judges hearts and minds. Is that what it said? 17, verse 9 and 10. The heart is deceitful. Who can understand it? Yeah, but this is where the rubber meets the road in judgment. I don't know my own heart is exactly what that says. David doesn't know his own heart. It says the heart's deceitful. He called on God, the one who searches hearts and minds, and that's what this verse says God does. Only God can understand the heart. He's the one that searches hearts and minds. The reality of verse 10 is that only God can know and understand it. David cannot know his own heart without God, and even with God. Without God and even with God, sometimes our situation without God and even with God, sometimes everything that is filtered through our heart is colored by our situation. Clearly, whatever you're going through, your heart feels what you think is right is what you're doing. I mean, you think that's true, huh? I mean, what I'm saying is true, but if you okay, let me keep going. That very thing could be the reason God's action on our part seems delayed at times. David said, I want you to judge them right now based on my integrity and my righteousness. And what did God do? We don't have any evidence that he did anything yet. We're going to find out David knows it very full well he's going to. But it might be very well that he knows David's heart. I don't know that that's what it says, but he called on God as the one who knows hearts and minds. Judges hearts and minds. In fact, it says judges hearts and minds, doesn't it? Searches hearts and minds. He knows what your heart is. And Jeremiah 17:9 says, nobody understands the deceitful heart. Hearts are deceitful. We can't possibly understand it. Okay, so let me keep going. David thinks he is justified to call on God's wrath, but he may not be justified right now. He wanted judgment up for himself based on righteousness and integrity. That's what he wants. He seems justified. That does not mean judgment will not come, and it may not mean when it comes that it will be in the form that he desires. David thinks he knows what God should be doing. God will judge. He will do it when he's ready, and he will do it in the way that he wants to do it. It may or may not look like what David wants when it comes. And it may not even come till the afterlife. But I'm saying, what good does that do me now? I want it now. I want judgment now. Well, we got to change the way we're thinking if that's what we think, because that isn't how God operates. God has plans and purposes. They will not be thwarted, nor will he be surprised by anything. Verse 10 says this, my shield is God Most High, who saves the upright in heart. The question, no question but that the God Most High is our shield, even if our heart is not in sync with his at times. Even if I think God says, you need to, maybe not so much, he's still my shield. I still run to God. I should be running to God, right? Even if it turns out I'm wrong. Okay, God Most High here is the first, I don't think I said this right. He refers to God Most High. God Most High appears, I think I'm right about this, appears 2 times in the Bible. God Most High, those specific words. As for sure, God should be our refuge all the time. We should always have as our first option to shelter in place. Remember talking about that last week? Shelter in place. That should be our first option when we're searching for relief. It should be to run to God, just like the chick runs to her mother. That's the instinctive, what the chick does every time. Right? Runs to mama. First time. You don't have to worry about it. they see the fox in the hen house, he starts looking around. Where's Mama? I'm going to Mama.
She'll protect
Yeah, well,
you.
maybe. But we should be doing the same thing. We should be looking for shelter from God in the same way. Who is the upright? He says right there in verse 10, I want to made some discoveries this way. He says, my shield is God Most High who saves the upright in heart. Who is the upright in heart? Somebody flip over to Psalm 51, 16 and 17. Uh-huh. Yeah.
For you will not delay the sacrifice, or I would give it. You will not be pleased with the burnt offering. Sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart of God he will not despise.
That's what God's looking for. That's the upright heart. It's a guy that knows that what my gifts to God that I do because the law says I should do them is not what he's looking for. What he wants is a contrite heart. He wants a humble servant. He wants somebody that loves him because he needs him. Okay. We should always have as our first... I already did all that. Alright. Keep going here. I'm not even going to get to the good part. God prepares for judgment. Verse 11 to 13. Let me read verse 11. God is a righteous judge. Expresses his wrath every day. Of course he's a judge. Of course he's righteous, so therefore he's a righteous judge. Because of that, he displays his wrath every day. A better translation is he's angry with the wicked every day, or he feels indignation every day. He doesn't always just, I don't always displaying his wrath. There's a lot of really good people around. So, he's always indignant with them, always. Okay? Verse 12. If he does not relent, and I really like this, if he does not relent, he will sharpen his sword, he will bend and string his bow. If he does not relent, he will do what an otherwise righteous God would do, eliminate unrighteousness. That's what God should do, right? He's a righteous God, doesn't like it, so why didn't he just go wipe it out? Because he relents. But he relents. He gives us a chance to discover his plan of salvation and come to him. Without Jesus in our heart, even the best day of your life is a day with the curse of God resting on it. If you don't have Jesus in your life, your best day where you help most little old ladies across the street, where you did the most great things for the world, God sitting right there waiting to be exercised in your life. Yet he relents. Verse 13. He has prepared his deadly weapons. He makes ready his flaming arrows. Okay. Oh, he has weapons of judgment. He's always got them. He's listed them out there metaphorically. Flaming arrows, deadly weapons. He says, they are standing at the ready, yet he relents. Judgment may tarry, but it never comes late. See, David looks at these things and I just get this feeling he thinks it's coming too late because he wants it now. But God is a righteous judge. He's when he judges, he does what is right. Between the sinner and the wrath of God is a beating heart. You got a sinner with a beating heart just like mine. And the only thing that keeps this thing going is God's sovereign grace. I'm saved. When I die, I know where I'm going. When the unsaved person dies, I know where he's going to. the only things that keep him from going right now is a beating heart. As long as his heart beats, he's not going there. And the only thing that keeps his heart beating is God's grace. All right, getting there. Verse 14 to 16 sounds like 3 Proverbs. Verse 14 says, he who is pregnant with evil and conceives trouble gives birth to disillusionment. The father of sin is Satan. The mother of sin is we choose. Our own inner bent and twisted perversions, our sinful nature, and propensity to sin gives rise to this list of things I just wrote down very quickly. Gives rise to I need to go on. All that comes out of us, out of a simple heart. If you can make that list, never ends. I mean, it keeps on going. Read James 1, 14 and 15. Somebody. James 1, 14, 15.
But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by the desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death.
There it is. It grows inside you, and just one day you exercise, you act on it. Then you got live and that rascal. He didn't give credit to James. Without faith in Christ, those things give rise to a wickedness in our self-will, which begins to grow and develop in the soul. I am so, when I read Romans 7, Paul is saying, that's what he's saying. All that, the very thing I find myself not wanting to do is the very thing I find myself doing. At the very end of that chapter, he says, thank God for Jesus Christ. Thank God for Jesus, because all that's going on in me. It's still going on in me. Thank God for Jesus Christ. Verse 15 says, he who digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit he's made. How does that go? If you go out seeking revenge, you better dig what? 2 graves. Have you heard that? The consequences of our sin can put us in the very hole we're digging for somebody else. This really sounds like malice. This is the ugliest word I think is in the Bible. It's malice when you understand what it is. More than spitefulness, more than maliciousness, more than hostility, it's more than ill feeling. It's cold-blooded, calculating, premeditated, deliberately executed wickedness. What an ugly, ugly word. Even Christians, we're not going to look it up, but Ephesians 4:31, Paul tells them, he's talking to get rid of it, all forms of it. That means that in some form, it's in their life. Malice. That's like hatred for another person. He says, get rid of it. It is an awful, awful word. And he says, the end result is you may be digging a hole and you may end up falling in it. Okay, we're going to wrap up here pretty quick. Here's these last 2 verses are killers. Verse 16 says this: the trouble he causes recoils on him. His violence comes down on his own head. Boomerang. It goes out. What you throw out comes back. Start heaping bad stuff on somebody, and you may one day find it coming back right at you. The judgment for the other guy, which we seek, may not come until the next life. We say, but I want it now. say you should have to change the way you think. Change your heart and recognize how God, the righteous judge, operates. I got one. We ought to finish verse 17. This is the last point. It's one verse. I thought this would be easy to cover till I studied it. Jubilation. He asked for judgment. Nothing's happening. But now we're going to see he knows sooner or later it is going to happen. 17 says this, I will give thanks to the Lord because of his righteousness and will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. There can be very difficult messages for us to receive. We see no evidence that God has changed anything in David's life yet. There's nothing there. He's asked for all this stuff to fall down on his enemies' heads. But we see overflowing confidence here that David knows God will act. He knows God is in control and he is on his throne. Now, what I want to tell you is, how do you know that from that verse? I discovered how you can know that. That God Most High is Elion. Have you ever heard that word? It's a new name for God. That's going on my notes, Jan. I've got a note that I pass out of names for God. I studied this little book. I made a note for the class. That's not on it. That's in the Bible 36 times. It means the God of control. So when you see God Most High, not Lord Most High, but God, well, this is Lord Most High, but that is the word for Yahweh. That is the same as God. It is the omnipotent God, the all-powerful God who is in control, is exactly what that means. We don't know it because we're not Jewish. If you were reading Hebrew, you would know exactly what that name means in context. God is in control. Does that make this sound more reasonable? Elion is used 36 times in the Bible. First was in Melchizedek. We're not going to go back and look at that, but we studied Melchizedek. Remember the three guys showed up? This is right before God destroyed Sodom. One of them was Jesus, we think. But he was talking about the God Most High there. Anyway, nevertheless, that's where it occurred the first time. So that's the end of chapter 7, and it is very clear. David had accusations made against him. He says, I am innocent. If you don't think I am, just kill me right now. But I know, he describes how God is, and he says, at the end, I know you will